She humiliated the human in front of everyone. Then he simply walked away. The glass in my hand was still cold when Veyren pointed at me and told the whole hall that humans were an accident nobody had bothered to correct. The room went quiet in that special way. Rooms go quiet when everyone wants to see what happens next. My name is Callum Ward, and I was the only human on Threll Station that night, standing in a suit that did not match anyone else's ceremonial silk, holding a drink I had not asked for, listening to a woman I had met twice call my entire species a mistake. She kept going. She said humans still burned fuel to leave their own planet, while her people bent light itself to travel between stars. She said our lives were short, the way a candle is short, gone before anyone learns to miss the flame. She said the compact only let us join because pity was cheaper than war. Every sentence landed a little harder than the one before it, and every sentence pulled a few more eyes toward me, waiting to see if I would break. I did not answer her. I set the glass down on a passing tray, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the doors at the far end of the hall. Behind me, her voice followed for a moment, sharp and confident. Then it faltered, because an insult needs a reaction to survive, and I had taken mine out of the room with me. The corridor outside was quieter, lit by long strips of pale blue light that ran along the ceiling like veins. I did not slow down. My heart was pounding harder than I wanted to admit, not from anger, but from the effort of staying calm in front of 200 strangers who expected me to fail. I had learned that lesson long before Threll Station, back when I was 23, and pulling people out of a collapsed shelter during the coastal floods in Bristol, when panic killed faster than the water did. Calm was not weakness. Calm was the only thing that ever worked. I reached the observation deck at the end of the corridor and stopped there, hands on the rail, looking out at the black between the stars. That was when the lights flickered for the first time. At first, I thought it was nothing, a power fluctuation, the kind of thing station engineers dealt with every day without anyone noticing. Then the floor gave a low shudder under my boots, and a red line of light began to pulse along the ceiling strips instead of the usual blue. A voice came over the station comm, calm but clipped, speaking in the flat tone reserved for real emergencies. Reactor containment failure in Sector 4. All personnel evacuate to designated shelters immediately. Sector 4 was the trade wing, one corridor away from the gala hall I had just walked out of. 200 delegates were still in that room, most of them from species that had never needed to run from anything in their lives, because their stations never failed, because their engineers never made mistakes, because they had grown so used to safety that the idea of danger had become a story rather than a possibility. I ran back the way I came. The corridor was already filling with movement, elegant robes catching on doorframes, tall Doskani elders trying to walk fast in ceremonial shoes never designed for speed. Nobody was screaming, not yet, but the calm was the fragile kind, the kind that cracks all at once. I pushed through the crowd toward the gala hall doors, and that was where I found Veyren, standing frozen near the entrance, staring at a wall panel that had begun flashing amber warnings in a language her translator was struggling to keep up with. She looked at me the way people look at something they do not expect to need. I did not wait for her to ask. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the emergency stairwell instead of the crowded main corridor, because I had already noticed something nobody else in that hall seemed to register, that the reactor warning light pattern meant the containment breach was on the upper level, and the lift shafts ran straight through it. Taking the lift down would have carried them directly past the failure point. The stairwell was longer, but it was the only route that stayed clear. Behind us, a station engineer named Priya Anand was shouting instructions into her comm unit, trying to redirect the crowd, but her voice kept breaking under the noise of alarms and frightened translators all speaking over each other in a dozen different tongues. I caught her eye through the chaos and pointed at the stairwell door. She understood immediately and began waving people toward it, her voice steadying now that she had somewhere solid to send them. Veyren pulled against my grip once, asking why she should trust the very species she had spent the evening mocking. I did not have time for pride, hers or mine. I told her the truth instead, that trust had nothing to do with it, that the numbers on that wall panel did not care who she thought was beneath her, and that the stairwell was simply the only door that would not kill her. She stopped arguing after that. The stairwell filled fast, Dozens of bodies moving down metal steps that rang under so many feet at once. Somewhere above us, a second alarm joined the first, higher pitched, urgent, in a way that made even the calmest faces around me go pale. I kept my hand steady on the rail, and kept my voice low and even, telling the people near me to keep moving, not to stop, not to look back. Fear spreads through eyes as much as through sound, and I did not want anyone catching a glimpse of my own fear, because I did not have room for it either. Halfway down, a young Velkesh boy stumbled and fell against the railing, his ceremonial robe catching under his own feet. His mother was several steps ahead, swept forward by the crowd, calling his name without being able to turn back against the current of bodies. I reached him before he could go down completely, lifted him back onto his feet, and kept one hand on his shoulder the rest of the way, guiding him past the worst of the crush, until we reached the lower deck and his mother's arms. The lower deck was already crowded with delegates from a dozen worlds, all pressed together under the harsh white light of the emergency shelters, all watching the same status board that Priya's team had set up near the entrance. The numbers on it were not good. Containment pressure in Sector 4 had dropped further, and the automated systems meant to seal the breach had failed to engage on the first 2 attempts. I found Priya near the control terminal, her hands moving fast over a panel that clearly was not built for the kind of manual override she was trying to force. She told me the automated seal required a physical reset from a junction 2 levels up, close enough to the breach that the radiation levels there were already climbing past what most species could safely tolerate for more than a few minutes. Velkesh physiology could not handle that exposure at all. Neither could most of the delegates in that shelter. Human tolerance to short bursts of radiation, thanks to decades of orbital and deep space work, sat measurably higher than almost every species in the compact. It was not something anyone had ever complimented us on. It was, that night, the only thing that mattered. I did not ask permission. I took the radiation suit Priya handed me, checked the seals twice the way I had been trained to, and went back up the stairwell alone, while everyone else stayed behind the shelter doors. The junction was exactly where she said it would be, buried behind a service panel that took both hands and most of my strength to force open. The reset sequence was simple in design but stubborn in practice, a series of manual locks that had to be turned in the correct order, while alarms screamed somewhere close enough to feel through the floor. My hands were steady, even though nothing else in me felt steady at all. I worked through the sequence once, watched the pressure needle twitch and fail to hold, and started again from the beginning, without letting myself think about how much time had already passed. The second attempt held. The pressure needle climbed back into the safe range and stayed there, and the amber warning lights along the corridor shifted slowly back to blue. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to, just breathing, before making my way back down to the shelter deck. When the doors opened, the room went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than the one in the gala hall. Priya reached me first, checking the readout on my suit before saying anything else, confirming the exposure had stayed within safe limits. Behind her, the boy I had carried down the stairwell was sitting against the wall with his mother's arm around him, both of them watching me with an expression I did not have a word for. Veyren was near the back of the crowd, still in her torn ceremonial silk, watching me cross the room without saying a single word. I did not look for a reaction from her. I had stopped needing one, somewhere on that stairwell, or maybe somewhere back in that gala hall when I first chose to walk away instead of arguing. Either way, the need was gone. Word of what happened on Sector 4 spread through Threll Station faster than any official report could have managed, and within a day, the story had reached delegations that had never met me and never would. Nobody framed it as a victory for me personally, and I never wanted it framed that way. It was simply a fact that sat next to another fact from the night before, side by side, for anyone willing to look at both. A species that had been called an accident, a mistake, something barely tolerated out of pity, had also been the only thing standing between 200 people and a sealed door that would not open in time. Nobody needed to say which fact mattered more. The silence around Veyren in the days that followed said it clearly enough on its own. I went back to my quarters that night, wrote my incident report the same way I wrote every other report, and went to sleep without checking whether anyone had sent a message of thanks. Some nights the work is enough on its own, whether anyone claps for it or not, and that night was one of them.